Good evening and welcome to the Superintendent's 2024 webinar on open enrollment. My name is Fred Rundle, our superintendent of our school district, and I want to welcome everyone tonight. I'll have the panelists who are joining me introduce themselves in just a second, but just a couple of things to open up the evening. First off, thank you to everyone for your grace and patience in delaying this webinar for a week. I had a last minute health ailment, which I'm okay from now. But I was not going to be in a good position to do this last week. So thank you for your patience. Big picture, purpose for tonight. When I was hired as superintendent, after the board had done a number of listening sessions and community engagement, certainly one of the top priorities that the community wanted was transparency and ongoing engagement and communication. And we've been trying to do that ever since. And when I say we, it is our team, people who are on the screen tonight, as well as in our schools, in our committees. But tonight is really our opportunity for me to continue to engage and inform our community. I certainly want there to be transparency. There's an upcoming recommendation that I'll be making to the board on March 28th regarding open enrollment and want our community to know about that. Provide clarity tonight on the issue of open enrollment as we move forward, and then certainly to answer questions. We know that there's a number of those. So let's talk about the format. We are recording tonight's Zoom session. That way we'll have it available sometime tomorrow on our website, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The closed captioning option is available at the bottom of your screens as individual participants and attendees. So if closed captioning would help you, please feel free to use that option. And lastly, we have the chat feature open for those of you who are attendees to send your questions in as the webinar is underway, and that will make sure that we are able to see them. We have Ian Henry over here who will be monitoring that and helping to kind of collate them together as we go. So I'm going to spend about 35, 40 minutes walking us through big picture items around open enrollment. And then I'm going to turn more into a moderator role. And that's why I brought along colleagues and fellow partners in our school district who I think can also add context to some of the questions that you might be posing tonight, with the reminder that as we've been monitoring Nextdoor and questions to the school board and questions to us, we've also created an FAQ. So we may not get to all the questions tonight, but the idea is certainly that we have an FAQ going. This presentation will be on our website. The recording will be on the website. The FAQs will be on the website, and all of that's going to be on a brand new page within our site that Ian's been working on. So before we get ahead, why don't we go ahead and do introductions, and I'll go ahead and start with our principal of our high school, Mr. Wold.
Good evening. I'm Nick Wold. I'm our principal. This is year 7 in the district, Dr. Rundle. So looking forward to being here tonight and answering any questions and helping in any way I can.
Great. Thanks for being here. And let's stay at the high school with our athletic director.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Blaine. I'm the athletic director at the high school.
And staying at the high school as well, Miss McClellan.
Hi, my name is Jennifer McClellan. I'm the CTE director for the district, and I've been in that role for 8 years. I've been at the district for 11, and I've lived on the island for 26 years.
And then moving to the district office, we have 2 people from our district office tonight. We'll start off with Jamie Prescott.
Hi, Jamie Prescott. Been with the district now for this is my 23rd year, I believe. As a teacher, as an admin at the high school, and now at the district office. Also graduated from Mercer Island High School and went through Lake Ridge and IMS as well.
And lastly, our communications coordinator.
Ian Henry, I'm the communications coordinator for the district. I've been here just over 2 years. And like Jamie, I am a graduate of the high school, and I also went through Islander Middle School.
Great. So thanks to our panelists. Like I said, our panelists will be joining more towards the Q&A portion of this evening. So let me get into the presentation that we've prepared. I think it's always important whenever we're talking about changes or making additions or subtractions to our school district that we're thinking about all of the other aspects that might be involved. Some of these are competing priorities, some of them are complementary, and we like to think of them certainly as cogs in a wheel. Our school board has 12 operational expectations of the superintendent, and these are the expectations that the board has of me as I carry out the work in conjunction with our tremendous staff. And I think there's 5 that really come into play when I think about open enrollment. And the first one is our student-focused fundamentals. All of the decisions around open enrollment need to be thought of in terms of what are the benefits, what might be some of the drawbacks, and how is that going to impact our students, not only in the academic experience they have, but also social emotional learning, thinking about our efforts to always prioritize the learning and personalize it. So first and foremost is our students. The second would be, how are we treating community members? And this isn't about being kind or unkind, although that's absolutely important. This is about if new families are going to be joining the school district, open enrollment or not, how are we welcoming them in? For our community members who are here, what are we doing to make sure that we're supporting everyone in our school district? And then there's always budget and financial implications. And we're going to talk about some of these in a little bit more detail. But OE10 is right at the heart of open enrollment. And that is, what are the instructional programs we have today? And what instructional programs might we have tomorrow as a result of changing demographics with enrollment? And then finally, do we have the facilities and the capital assets to be able to bring in new students or potentially look at it? So tonight I'll talk about our challenges. I'll talk about a framework that we've used around attracting, retaining, and returning students. We'll talk about some financial hurdles that we're facing and we've already overcome, provide you with an enrollment update, some of the strategies and the data that's coming forward around our efforts to attract and retain students, the what, the how, the when, and the why of open enrollment, a little idea about what's happening in and around the region with open enrollment, and then lastly, as we said, the Q&A. So big picture, what are the challenges facing us? Enrollment. We've been talking about enrollment in terms of budget, in terms of staffing, and this has been a conversation for a couple of years now, particularly if you were following the long-range facility planning process. We know we're in a decline in enrollment, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. State funding continues to be a challenge, and we'll be talking about that. Our aging facilities, and what are we going to do with our facilities short-term and long-term around investing capital dollars to improve and renovate, or are we looking at bond measures where we're talking about building new schools and whatnot? We also are thinking about the academic offerings. Are our experiences and the classroom experiences for our students matching the values of our district, and more importantly, what our students are going to need as they start making choices beyond Mercer Island School District? Our complexity of our students and their needs has certainly changed and continues to evolve. And finally, the overall social and emotional well-being of our students. I can't impress upon this enough and to say that when you're looking at these challenges, especially in the context of the operational expectations that I outlined, there isn't any one solution that's going to solve all of these things. It is going to be several solutions because these are all interdependent, or they are interdependent and not independent of one another. And so when we're talking about open enrollment, and I'll get into this, this is not the only thing that I'm thinking about as a superintendent, that we're thinking about as a school district. So let's talk about our framework. Some of you who have been to some previous meetings, perhaps of mine, have really heard me talk about these 3 simple words with very complex implications. First is, how do we continue to attract families to the Mercer Island School District, irrespective of open enrollment? How do we make sure that Mercer Island is attractable and is desirable, and that people want to continue to move here because of the schools? And then once they're here, how do we retain them? How do we continue to improve upon our offerings, improve upon the way in which we're engaging families and working with students such that people want to stay through graduation? And finally, for those who have made different choices, private schools or other, how do we get them to return? How do we really think about our school district and really paint a different picture to bring students back? So within the context, we certainly have financial considerations, and I want to start big picture with the state level. These are new graphs that I haven't shown in previous slides, but they're just out from OSPI, the operation, Chris Reichdahl from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. This first one is really taking a look at how does Washington spend its dollars compared to the rest of the country when it comes to education. I want to set some parameters here in context for those of you who may be new to Washington or don't remember the exact implications of the McCleary decision. In the 2014, 15, 16 era, there was a decision that was made by the Supreme Court based on a lawsuit that came forward, and the decision was against the state. And essentially it said, in our state constitution, education is a paramount duty. And the lawsuit really hinged that our state wasn't fully funding education and therefore was not fulfilling its paramount duty of funding public education. Why that's important in this graph is you can see that the state of Washington started making some progress and really started closing a gap in a very simple way to look at it, and that is percentage of gross state product, the gross state product. We got close, and now you can see actually we're working and we're heading in a different direction. How do we contextualize that, and what does that mean? Take a look again over time on this graph. If we look at that post-McCleary era, the state of Washington and the legislature signed by the governor, we were investing, if we take into account inflation, over 50% of the state budget into public education in our K-12 schools. Fast forward to the 2023-2024 budget from last year, and that had shrunk to just 43.1%. And the more bad news for us, in the governor's desk right now is a new budget, and there's another reduction, even in this supplemental, of another 0.3%. So what does that mean for schools? If we take into account inflation again, and we look at the per pupil revenue that we're receiving from the state, since that high water mark when we were over 52%, we're losing out on roughly $1,000 per student that we would have been collecting had the state even kept up with where they were coming out of McCleary. In a district with over 3,800 students, we're talking $33.8 million in lost revenue compared to where perhaps we should be with that. So that's a state level picture. How does that impact us though? We're looking at things like our special education. We already outspend special education by $6 million. It's listed as $4 million on the screen because we claw back $2 million through a process called safety net, where the state reimburses us, but we're still outspending what the state and federal government provide us by $4 million. Benefits have been increasing. The state and its funding of our employees, we receive just about 300 FTE worth of staff. So in other words, the state is providing us the funding for about 300 of our staff members, but we have 432 full-time staff members. We know that the state is underfunding what the regional costs are of employment, and a teacher right now, we're coming up with out of local dollars, $27,500. And there's others here too. Insurance is going up and the cost of just employing people. So what's happened then contextually over time? This is really taking a look at our fund balance. Our fund balance are the dollars in the bank, what's in our savings account. And you can see that from the period of just before the COVID pandemic to right when I was coming on board as the superintendent, the school district was making specific recommendations and made a concerted effort to spend down fund balance and really start investing that savings into the schools. A big reason for that, we hardly received any federal stimulus dollars. We received just over $1 million in federal stimulus money from the COVID recovery. Other districts our size were receiving $6 million and more. And the reason is it was based on Title I funding. We needed to continue to keep our district going, so we spent down our fund balance. But we got to the point where we needed to make sure that we were on the road to recovery. And as I've reported out in earlier webinars and with other groups, I'm pleased to report that compared to where we were a year ago. We grew fund balance, and we're on pace to grow fund balance again to start rebuilding. So how have we done that? How have we been able to recover in the face of adversity from a fiscal standpoint? One of the things is being much better and correcting our enrollment projections, really leaning into our demographic studies that I'll talk about here in a moment, and thinking about some of the projections that we're making, and then matching our enrollment with our staffing. I know that there was big conversation last year, particularly around elementary librarians and others, where we had to make some reductions. And really that was to try to continue to match the decreasing enrollment in our schools to the staffing as we move forward. We've reduced administrative staffing, we've reduced teaching staffing, support positions. We have cut materials and supplies out of our budgets. We're collaborating with MIEA through contract negotiations. And we're also strategically using our buckets of money so that we can maximize the dollars. And I know that there's been some criticism of, that we're using cap tech dollars, which I'll talk about in a second, to pay the general fund. It's not that we're paying the general fund, we're actually spending the money what it was intended for, and really making sure that we're maximizing all of those different buckets of money. So let's look at the local taxpayer here on Mercer Island. On the left-hand side, you have the 2015 property tax picture. And on the right-hand side, this is our current tax picture here on Mercer Island. A couple things I want to point out. 2015, pre-McCleary. So going back to pre-McCleary, at that time, about a quarter of the taxes collected were going to the state to fund public education. At that time, as we fast forward to today, in a post-McCleary world where the state took over and said, we're going to reduce the burden on the local communities and increase the responsibility of the state, now over 36% of your local tax dollars go to funding public ed. So what that's meant at the local level, when we think about our levies and our bonds, is at one point, we were actually collecting more money than the state was, that was able to stay right here on Mercer Island and not go into more of a general fund. In a post-McCleary world, we're not able to collect as much, which I'll get into in a little bit later on. So we're collecting far less at the local level. The theory is the state should be picking up more, but as I illustrated in the previous graphs, unfortunately, the state isn't fulfilling that, and more dollars are leaving our community than are coming back. Granted, what's good for all of public education is good for our communities, but when you put that up against the fact that we can no longer look to our local taxpayers, it becomes a challenge. So let's unpack our levies a little bit. I'm going to start off with our enrichment programs and operations levy. When I said that we are capped, one of the decisions coming out of the McCleary was that districts like ours with a more rich tax base in terms of the total value of homes could no longer use the home values as the driver for the levy. Instead, it was going to be collected based on a per pupil amount. It started off at $2,500. It has grown with inflation to $3,100, and we're anticipating that to go to $3,200 next year. When we went to the voters in 2022, the cap that we set for ourselves was $12 million. So our current levy for the 4 years of this levy, EP&Os run on a 4-year cycle, our cap each year is $12 million. When you take 3,880 students, our enrollment this year, you multiply that times the $3,100, you see that we actually exceed the cap. So whether or not we gain 20 new students next year because they're coming to us because they're moving in, or whether or not they're coming in open enrollment, we're not going to be raising taxes, if you will, for students, because we're at a cap. In a few years from now, when we revisit this levy, we can have a different conversation, but I wanted to paint that picture of where we are. So lastly on that, I've certainly seen the question of, well, we want to increase that. If we're capped, why don't we go ahead and uncap ourselves? We've really got to wait until the next levy cycle to be able to do that. One last thing, what does an EP&O levy pay for? EP&O levies are extremely important to school districts. When you see school districts fail this kind of levy, you start to see massive reductions in programs and options because, as I said, the state is already underfunding us. So how do we fill that gap? The EP&O levy is a big driver for that. It's everything from materials and supplies that we need all the way through to salaries with our staff. So when we're thinking about our nursing staff and the state only covering less than 2 nurses for our district, that's where our EP&O levy comes in, because we feel like there should be a richer staffing model, for instance. The Cap Tech levy, that stands for the Capital and Technology Levy. This is run every 6 years. So EP&O is every 4 years. The Cap Tech levy, we run every 6 years. The levy is set as an amount, and then it's collected in 2 different time periods, just like all the taxes, one in April and one in October. And so the collection amount that we set for 2023 spread out amongst the tax base was $7.7 million. Next year, with increases with inflation and other adjustments, we'll collect about $8 million. And our expenditures for this are things like student and staff devices, our instructional technology coaches, facility repairs. So this summer, when we're talking about recarpeting some of our older elementary schools, that's where these dollars come in. They help us maintain the buildings and also improve our technology. We collect it on an assessed value basis. It's not collected on a student basis. So why is that relevant to open enrollment? Many of these costs that are associated with a Cap Tech levy, whether or not we have students who have moved in or we have students who are enrolling from elsewhere, we know we need to invest in carpet. We need to invest in boilers. We've got to continue to put the best technology in front of our students. And some of these are things we've already paid for. And so it doesn't necessarily diminish greatly simply because we have more or less students. On the magnitude that we're talking, it's such a negligible amount overall. So a question is certainly, will my child lose out on any benefits of the Cap Tech levy if off-island students enroll, has been a question. And I might answer this even a little bit later on, but the long and short, in my opinion, is it wouldn't be about anyone losing out on that benefit. The dollars would stretch further, but again, the numbers that I envision for an open enrollment, we're talking, 80 to 100 students that I'll talk about in a bit, spread out across all of, the school district and the tax base. That amount isn't as great. A couple of did you knows. The school board has just approved and will be going out to refinance our bonds. In 2023, we sold half the bonds from that particular election. And we'll be refinancing later on this month and hopefully saving the taxpayers $1.5 million. And then we hope to do it again next year. 1.5 million spread across a tax base this large, I realize is not going to be massive savings for the individual. I point it out because I think it's important to always demonstrate to our community that whether or not it's a levy or a bond, whether or not it's state dollars or local dollars, we are trying to maximize all of them and do our very best with the resources that are allocated to us. So a quick overview here. Many of you have seen these, but just an enrollment trend over time, starting in the early 70s on the left and advancing all the way to that black arrow, which is where we are now. You can see our district has had a history of kind of this roller coaster. This isn't different than other school districts as well, where, there have been times with high enrollment, times with lower enrollment, and then districts like ours doing different things, building schools, closing schools, renovating schools, and that's what those circles are. Those are major renovations or changes that we've made to our facilities since the early 90s. So now we're at a new place. We're talking to our demographers, and they're talking about this slow decrease in enrollment. So if this is the macro level look here, if we look at the micro level here, we can see that gradual stair step down since 2020, 2021. That was projected prior to COVID. The big difference for our district and many others in our region is that big decline during the COVID pandemic. And as that huge drop came, it certainly created and sent some shockwaves through school districts as a whole. So if we take a look at what's causing that, what's causing this gentle decline there, a big factor is this graph right here. This graph compares in the spring from 2009, which I chose because that was my first year in the district. So from 2009 to today, what's the difference between the kindergartners in our elementaries and the 12th graders getting ready to graduate? And you can see in the last several years that we have increased that gap greatly. Our senior classes are those big classes that were coming through when we needed to build Northwood, when our elementaries were above 600 or in West Mercer approaching 700. Those students are now getting ready to graduate out, and behind them are much fewer students coming in kindergarten. What's causing that? A lot of that is a decline in the birth rate that we're seeing across King County and not unlike other parts of the country. So our current enrollment by grade looks like this. Kindergarteners right now in our schools are less than 200. You can see a jump up in first grade, which we tend to see in our school district as families make a different choice after kindergarten and tend to stay perhaps in kindergarten for private school and then come to first grade. We see another uptick from 5th to 6th grade in general, and that's students and families, again, making a decision after perhaps being in private school or staying in a school and then making a move at that natural break, which is middle school, and then again from 8th to 9th grade. You see there, of course, the maroon colors of the kindergarten on one side and the 12th graders for illustrating again that delta that we're seeing. So let's return back to our framework. We've got to think about enrollment and open enrollment as a both and. It is about attracting families. It's about retaining them when they're here, and it's about returning those who made other choices. And so what are some things that we're doing to attract families? Led by Ian, who you met a few minutes ago, we have been increasing our presence on social media and trying to tell our story. We want to continue to amplify the things that we're doing well. We want to continue to accelerate our improvement and tell that story. And here are a couple of ways that we're doing that. Our principals, our school teams, our counselors, myself, others at the district office, we're also putting a number of things into motion that we haven't done before. We've done individualized school tours, but we're doing more than we've ever done before. We hosted Future Islander Night. We identified 40 families who had withdrawn in recent years to invite them in. We invited our 8th graders to come and led by Mr. Wold in the high school, they hosted this wonderful evening to really celebrate the high school and tell its story in January. To coincide with that, we moved up our 8th grade visit. I've been conducting family focus groups, recently meeting with private school families to determine why they left, what we could do differently. And then as I start to think about how we bring families back, we have some student focus groups that have been going on. I'll be meeting with some of those with Mr. Wold and others at the high school in just a couple of weeks. We're meeting with realtors, finding out about those who are looking at the school district or the community, and is the school district still desirable? We are working with our PTAs and our PTSAs, our middle school with their Gator for a Night, parent information night, elementary tours. And so when I say that this isn't about one solution, it's because these are other solutions. What are we continuing to do to improve our school district? I know, and I think we all know, that competition for education and students hasn't been any greater. And I've heard questions around, is it fair that districts are opening to open enrollment, irrespective of Mercer Island? Are all these other districts, is that fair? I'm not here to judge whether or not it's fair or not. I just know that's the climate we're in. We have public schools who are using open enrollment to compete for students. We have private schools who we've had a history of students attending private schools in our school district. We want to continue to shrink that, but we have them making other choices. We know we have online schools, we have charter schools, and so competition is there. And we need to continue to up our game, continue to improve the educational experience in our school district, get better as educators to define ourselves differently from these other districts, private schools, online schools, et cetera. So we're seeing some encouraging things. You know, I oftentimes hear that all these people are leaving the school district because they're upset. We are losing some families, and losing any family is not what we want. However, this huge tidal wave, I'd like to put some numbers next to that. Prior to COVID, these are withdrawal trends, not taking into account families who are moving back to the district. This is, or moving into the district. This is just accounting for any families who are leaving for whatever reason. Could be moving out of the country, out of the state, private schools, etc. We lost about 4.5% of our students through natural attrition prior to COVID. As we got into that first year of COVID, that's where we lost 7%. Then again in 21-20, in that 21, that second year of COVID, we lost almost 8%. And then as we started recovering and we were back, but masks and there was uncertainty, 5.3%. But in that same time period of February to September last year, we only lost 3.2% of our students. And so these are encouraging trends. Is it definitive of what we're doing? No, but I think it's encouraging of where we're headed. So if we look at last year, now let's take a look at not just students who left, but let's take a look at new students who are enrolling. On almost a 2-to-1 ratio, we were enrolling students last year versus students who were leaving. So for every student who left, we were getting 2 students who were moving in. That's super important because when you have that delta between our kindergarten and our 12th grade, we want to make sure that anyone from 1st grade to 11th grade, that we're getting more students in than going out. And as I was talking to the registrar, Ms. Bareka, down at the middle school just last week, we're up 19 students compared to 8 withdrawals. So that trend is continuing for the current year. And we've already enrolled 12 new students from private schools to come back to IMS. Again, is it a trend? No, but are they indicators of what we're doing? Absolutely. And just a couple of visuals that tell a similar story. This is the total new enrollment at each grade level versus the total withdrawals from last February to the start of the current school year. We see the most success 1st grade through 8th grade. Kindergarten's not on here because that's not really a fair metric. We don't have students leaving necessarily, and they would all be coming. And then our high school is a little less successful there, and we're looking at some of those things. But I would say, as I've talked to Mr. Walden, he's on tonight, we have seen a great number of new enrollments already getting ready for next school year. And again, here's a look at the current school year. We're enrolling more 5th graders this year than who are leaving, more 6th graders, more 7th graders, more 8th graders moving forward. But remember, open enrollment is just one strategy. At the beginning of this presentation, I shared that there isn't one solution. And by no means do I think that we can stop trying to get better in academic excellence, trying to stop better in terms of programming, trying to stop going out to recruit families to want to move here. But open enrollment is a strategy to attract families. So in essence, open enrollment is when a district makes a decision that students who don't live inside the boundaries can enroll in their school district. Right now, and I'll show you a couple more specifics in a bit, all of our neighboring districts in and around the region are open to open enrollment. Open enrollment, it's a means to attract students to a district for a variety of reasons. Sometimes you want to even out enrollment at a grade level. Sometimes we want to sustain programs and services. Other times we want to create more predictable enrollment over time. I dug into, thanks to the help of Michelle Mueller, my assistant working with me. She's been poring over board minute notes and others from the 2007, 8, 9 era when we were last open to open enrollment. And there were discussions around, well, maybe it should just be 3rd grade at this school and 5th grade at this school and just 7th grade. And so, you know, that's that laser focused approach that you can take. And then lastly, the benefit of it is when a student transfers from one district to another, the state dollars follow that student, not the local dollars, but the state dollars. So that $11,600 follows the student to the new district. So who's open enrolled in our school district right now? The majority of them are staff members. In the state of Washington, we have a great benefit as public educators that we can bring our children to the school district where we work. Currently, we do have 60 students here open enrolled for that reason. Last year, we added city staff, and we have 3 families who have taken advantage of that. And then we have a few siblings from students who enrolled in 2008, 2009, who are still coming through our system. At that time, there was a decision that not just the student who was allowed through open enrollment, but all their siblings could attend. That was a local decision at the time. That is not something that's typical that school districts do, and is not part of my recommendation this time around. So how would it work? Let's get into that. I have to make a recommendation to our school board by April 15th. The school board doesn't have to approve. They don't have to reject. They can sit on it. The only thing that I have to do, and that by policy we do, is I need to make a recommendation. The school board, as of tonight, has not made a decision on that, nor have I brought them the formal proposal. That's coming on March 28th at their regularly scheduled board meeting. If it is approved, we would announce it to our community, and we would begin accepting enrollments in April. We would be accepting enrollment requests through April and beyond, and really looking at that 80 to 100 students. And I'll talk more about why here in a moment. I think, and I could be proven wrong, if this is approved, 30 students in the first year would be more probably likely than this huge windfall. A number of families have already made choices, and as I said, open enrollment in Bellevue and others has been open, so some families have made choices already. Students who are accepted, the enrollment is not guaranteed year after year. Every student, whether or not it's a staff student or an open enrolled student, they have to reapply, and that's part of the state process through OSPI. And it also allows districts to know that if there's not space for the students who are entitled to be here by residency, that you need as a district to be able to make the changes necessary. But on the same token, it is not something that you go into open enrollment with the idea that you're just going to bring someone in and then send them out. Our hope is that if we did bring students in, we would be able to maintain those students through graduation, particularly this 8th to 12th grade. So we'll be adding staff previously excluded. We have some athletic coaches and activity coaches who haven't been able to bring their students here. Some of our substitutes. So we'll be looking to expand that as well. So why just 8th to 12th grade? I'm really thinking about this in terms of volatility. I think we need to continue to think about our kindergarten through 7th grade, monitor that enrollment. We're making some decisions about facilities long-term. We need to be thinking right now and trying to hold things, kind of contain things the best we can. And thinking about 8th to 12th grade, that's where I think the programs and opportunities are most susceptible to being taken away. We can reduce slightly at the elementaries with something like librarians, and all kids still get to go to library. But if you start reducing programs at the school district, at the high school level, and you don't run a class, all of a sudden, no one gets to benefit from that class. And so that's really what I'm concerned about, is options for students. We're not going to accelerate fund balance because of this. This isn't going to be a way that we're going to speed up our economic recovery. This is going to be all about maintaining programs, services, and opportunities for our students. We're a one high school district. We have to have one high school that's comprehensive and available and accessible and providing opportunities for all. Our students can't just go to this high school or this high school for specialties. So how do we do that? We need to hang on to as much as we can. So I came up with the 80 to 100 students as we wrap up the discussion here. I came up with the 80 to 100 students looking at the demographers' projections over the next several years. As part of the long-range facility plan, our board asked that we conduct a demographic study with 2 demographers. And so in 2024, if we're just right around 1,400 students or just under, and then we look forward to 2930, when we see that we might be down closer to that 1,200 figure, and then we see this slight rebound, I'm thinking to myself, how might we be able to kind of dull the impact? There's going to be an impact. We're going to have to continue to make some slight reductions, but how do we do it in a way that's not going to impact students as much? So if you think about where we are now and then the down and coming back up, that's this graph right here. These kind of blue bars, I'll draw your attention there, that's school total. So if we're looking over time, you can see that Mercer Island High School is predicted to go down through 28, 29, and then start to see a resurgence as it comes back up. If we want to maintain class sizes where they are now, and when I say class, not individuals, but freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, if we want to maintain that around 357 students, then to do so, we look at the gray bars. We need to, in the next year or so, increase the high school by 40 to 80 students. Now, I said 80 to 100, and some have said, but Fred, it looks like it's going to be 200 later on. That goes back to what I was saying, which is this isn't the only solution. What can we do to continue to attract families? What do we do to return families back? Open enrollment's not going to solve all of this. We know that that gap's too much, but again, how do we maintain as much as we have? So let's look at neighboring districts just quickly. Those to the east, Bellevue, Issaquah, Lake Washington, they all have open enrollment currently underway right now. They're enrolling new students for next school year. Bellevue got out in December with this, and some of the districts who haven't been or have been a little quieter about it, we're starting to see a lot more coming through. Going out a little bit further than our closest neighbors, the North Shore, Snoqualmie Valley, Tahoma, all open to open enrollment. Some of these districts were never closed to open enrollment. This has been standard practice for them for many years because it's a way, again, just like we're thinking about, to keep students, to keep program, keep class sizes moving forward. So here's what I hope you take away from tonight. First off, the recommendation is a limited open enrollment. It's not where we were in 2007-8 when it was a K-12 open. We're really looking to contain this and think about it as a high school and late middle school addition. We need to continue to focus and attract, retain, and return students, but we also need greater control over the process, and 80 to 100 students is much more manageable while also softening that impact. Next year, just like every year, the superintendent has to make a recommendation to the school board. This will be revisited every single year. And so it's not as if a decision today has to be the same decision next year. The board could vote not to open enrollment and then choose to next year. And so nothing locks us in beyond a year. I think K-7, we've got to continue to focus on attracting and retaining, but we've got to study that enrollment a little bit more. We heard loudly and clearly from our community, don't close an elementary school. Don't mess with the elementary schools. Let's let them even out. Let's let them settle out. And we need to honor that commitment to the community from this past fall. The purpose for open enrollment. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. This isn't about a windfall of money. This is about programs and opportunities for our students. How do we maintain that quality educational experience in and out of the classroom at our high school when it's a one high school district trying to maintain as a 3A district in our communities? And finally, it won't be and it shouldn't be our only strategy. Open enrollment is just one of many levers. We have a lot of work to continue to do to grow our district, to grow our band or our brand. So lastly, let's get into some questions, comments, and concerns. I'm going to show you a couple things here. First off, at the bottom, you'll see mercerislandschools.org/open enrollment. This webpage will go live tomorrow. It's going to have, like I said, this presentation, the recording, my slides, and it will also have frequently asked questions. A number of the questions have come in from PTAs, as I said. We've seen them on Nextdoor, emails to the board, emails to me. And so we've collated a number of these that we hope to answer tonight if they haven't come in already, or hopefully our presentation opened it as well. So let's take a look at what's on your mind tonight, and thank you for participating. So let's start off with a question here. There seems to be a community sentiment that bringing back students is financially good, and bringing in a student from another district is financially bad. Is there a difference? That's a great question. Is there anyone, first off, I've been talking a lot, so let me turn to my colleagues. Colleagues, is there anyone who wants to answer that? Or I can kind of talk about it as well, but anyone want to answer that? And Ian, if you'd go back up to that so we can see that question again. So again, there seems to be community sentiment that bringing back students is financially good and bringing in a student from another district is financially bad. Is there any difference?
I'll dive in. I think Fred, Dr. Rundle, you can answer this just as well as anybody. I wouldn't use the term financially bad. Any money's good. So we're happy with any money coming in. I embrace the power of and. Just like Dr. Rundle said, he and his team are working so hard to bring our students back that have perhaps left, or retain students by providing amazing offerings here. But I think we are looking for any access for any cash to make sure we keep an excellent offering here for all of our students. So I would say it's not financially bad. This is good. This is good.
Nick, you were leaning in. Did you want to add something?
Nope, just making sure that I'm able to be heard. And so, yeah, no, Jen, you and Fred have it.
Great. And we'll add this to our FAQs because that's a slightly different question, a great one that we can add and answer as well. Another question is around the withdrawals. You know, are we looking at where the withdrawals are coming from? Are they coming from the middle school? Are they coming from the elementary schools and the high school? And wondering if they're coming from one particular school more than the others, is that an indicator, excuse me, that perhaps that particular portion of the experience has gone downhill? We do look at the numbers, and COVID made it a little challenging because of the numbers of students who were leaving. But we are certainly looking at that. We also look at where are they coming back. And so if you take a look at the December, and we can link this perhaps too, if you look at the December board meeting, we provided an update to the school board because we also survey families every year and get a sense of why did families leave, and we use that to try to improve as well. So we'll link that on there, but we are looking at that, and there are some trends in a way, but it's not as definitive as I think sometimes one might think.
Well, and I'll dive in. So many of those choices are so highly personal. It's really hard to sort of put all of those family choices and student choices into a single line item, because every student, every family are making decisions that are specific to that child or that family. It's actually quite fascinating.
A question that's come in is, you know, it's my understanding that open enrollment was discontinued in 2009 when it was started in 2007, and largely because the district was losing money. How would open enrollment result differently this time? We have an answer to this in the FAQ, and this is a great question as well. Historically, and actually this predates when Ms. McClellan, you were a parent at that time in the school district. I wasn't even here at that point, many of us on the screen tonight. But one of the things that was happening at that time was certainly the recession. And this has been some of the work that we've done, particularly this year or this week that I referred to with my assistant, Michelle, is taking a look at some of those board minutes and looking at what was happening contextually with the recession. Districts all across the country, and certainly in this region in Colorado, where I was at the time, we were, you know, losing out on state revenue, dollars were shrinking. And so trying to bring in students to kind of bridge that gap was certainly a strategy that many districts were using. But I think there were, you know, probably a couple of reasons why, and it wasn't just financially in terms of open enrollment ending. When I got here in 2009 for the 2009-10 school year, I inherited an elementary school with over 600 or almost 600 students. When I left 4 years later to come to the district office, Lake Ridge had about 640 students. Over at West Mercer, they had just under 700. And down at Island Park, they had almost 600. So some of it was also, we were seeing a resurgent, and we were being told that we're going to see an increase in the families coming to the island. And so some of it had to do with preparing for an increase in enrollment, which if you go back, and I won't go back here, but if you look at that trend line over that historical aspect of our district, that's exactly what happened, which is when we were then building Northwood and then redid half the middle school, and then certainly our high school. So I think it was multifaceted. I don't think it was just financial based on the picture that I'm looking back at in notes and things.
I'm gonna dive in a little bit. I was Island Park's PTA president in that time when we did the open enrollment. And one of just as far as Dr. Rundle just said, one of the main drivers for that was to even out our classes. We had a bubble going through all of our classes in the elementary school. And so that played havoc with the number of sections you'd have. You'd have, 4 sections of second grade, and then it would drop down to 2 sections the next year. And it just, the consistency of the programs, of the grades across the whole system was problematic. And so we did open enrollment in that time to even it out. And we stopped open enrollment because we evened it out. And so that was that situation. And so I was part of the PTA in that moment as we welcomed those families. And it was enormous value added and fabulous families, and it made our system even.
So a question comes in is, how do you choose students? If you do open enrollment, or districts that do, how do they choose their students? And so why don't I turn it over to Director Prescott, Jamie Prescott here, because she serves as that first point of contact in learning services for families when they go through open enrollment. I think you're on mute, Jamie.
Well, that would be helpful.
There you go.
So when a family applies through choice enrollment, we look at the criteria. We've got forms that they complete, and they have to fall into a certain category. So if we were to change that process, we would add a category that they would be a non-resident student and open or enrolling due to open enrollment being opened. We then look at reasons why we would turn a student away would be truancy and attendance concerns or disciplinary issues. And those are things that we can say no to a student for a choice transfer. Other than that, it likely would be either on a first come, first serve based on space availability. And we can put parameters on that. So it might be that there's more space for 10th grade than 11th grade or vice versa. We can set that based on what our enrollments are, what our availability is and things like that. So it might be that we choose to do it just on first come, first serve. If we had a swell of them, then we would need to discuss what our process would be. But there are some things for which a student may not be accepted for choice enrollment, even if we're open. And those would be egregious disciplinary issues or truancy issues.
And another question kind of building on that came in, and that is, what evidence do we even have that someone wants to send their kids to Mercer Island School District if they don't attend here? And so can you give a sense of what you see annually when we're not even open in terms of choice transfer? And then I don't know, Mr. Wold, if you have anecdotes on that as well, but let me start with Jamie.
So every year, even though since 2009 we've been closed, we still get applicants who will submit for a variety of reasons, better academic experience, closer to parent work, change of location or friend groups, etc. So we get on average probably between 10 and 20 applications for choice enrollment when we are not open. And so if people are willing to apply when we're not open, we can deduce that they would likely continue to apply if we were open. And perhaps if there was communication indicating that we were open, they would potentially come. I do think we are up against some timelines between private school commitments, other schools being open already for choice transfer. So I don't think there's going to be hundreds of applicants knocking down our door in the next few weeks. I do think it will take a concerted effort to get out and market it, but we do have people who, without any marketing and with being closed, still apply every year in hopes of gaining access to the district.
Mr. Wold, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would just offer, Fred, that I don't have hard data. I have just anecdotal data, just based on when I hear prospective families and why they've come to tour our school and they're processing. I toured a family today and they were talking about private schools and other things like that. And what attracts them is the strong reputation for high academic expectations and great programming, both extracurricular, co-curricular, and so forth. And the word is out. Our reputation is strong. We have a wonderful school and school district. So while I don't have hard data, I just know that I've been touring students over the span of this past year and attracting more and more families with some of our efforts. And all of it comes to them wanting to experience what our community has known for years.
A question came through of a family who's here on open enrollment, as a city, as a family with the city, and is there concern that we might close that or not? You know what? I don't think there's any indication right now that we're going to be closing open enrollment to our new partners with the city. That was actually an interlocal between our city council and our school board, which we codified it that way so that it was a little bit more set in stone. Next week, we're going to have, actually this Thursday, we'll be having a meeting with our board and the city council. Though this isn't on the topic to discuss it all, I think it will be reaffirmed that this is a positive for both the district and the city. Another question in there, and this starts to get maybe a little bit about programs and courses, is, are we using open enrollment to kick the can down the road or to avoid hard conversations about possible reductions to operating costs such as staff, courses, and programs? I can talk about it at a broad level, and then maybe Mr. Wool, you can talk a little bit about the scheduling process you're going through right now and what that looks like. I don't think that we have a history of trying to avoid hard conversations. We went through a RIF process last year that involved our elementary music teachers, PE teachers, librarians. We didn't bring back 2 of our elementary assistant principals. We didn't bring back an assistant principal at the high school. We didn't rehire an assistant superintendent when I became superintendent. So we've been having hard conversations as we're right-sizing or matching our enrollment to our staffing. So I don't think it's about trying to avoid those conversations. What I want to avoid is the impact to our students as much as possible. And when I start thinking about the high school and last year, when we were talking about a reduction in force, which a reduction in force is on the docket again this year. It's not as if we're not going to reduce staff this year. We will have to do that again. But how can we minimize that reduction so we're not cutting out classes and programs? Mr. Wold, I'll turn it over to you. This is what you're living day and night right now.
Yeah, and I want to be mindful that some of these decisions haven't been made yet. We've been tasked to reduce already this year 3.2 in FTE, and I'll say I don't want to speak openly about what programs may be hit and what departments might be affected, but I will say those conversations were had last spring. We're having them right now. That's not anything that we dodge, but what I've appreciated about this approach, and I haven't seen some of these slides until tonight, was softening this approach. We have a fantastic school. We have phenomenal educators. And with our enrollment trend and our financial constraint, I think that softening this piece as we attract and retain is the emphasis. I don't want to see programs go away or partial programs or classes that are a part of a progression, a first, second, or third year. When we start thinking about removing a class based on enrollment, and it's the middle part of an a progressive class, a 1, a 2, and a 3 level of a class. If you remove one of those, it affects the pipe, and it affects it for years. And so I'm mindful of all of those decisions that staff members then would have to make choices about their employment as well. And we've got some phenomenal people that we want to stay with our school.
I'm going to just come right in on top of Mr. Wolf, because he said it brilliantly, and sort of explain. There's been a couple questions about what programs, what staff. And Mr. Wald was exactly right. We can't absolutely say this staff person, this program, but a 3.2 cut at the high school is enormous and will impact what we have. And the courses that you'll really see impacted will be the CCR courses and the fine arts courses, because these are our electives. I'm the CT director. I manage the CCR courses. Those are all the courses that are career connected learning. So there's something involved in the course that connects to a career, to a college major. And this is the opportunity for students to do two things. One is to take courses that provide relevancy to their general ed offerings. Why am I learning English? So I can do well in this career. Why am I learning math? But it also helps them explore their careers and hopefully identify a college major without having to pay college tuition or pay any sort of tuition. And so the courses that might be impacted with a 3.2 cut are those. So horticulture, robotics, I look at media technology, music technology in our fine arts bands. Looking at what a 3.2 will do is difficult. This is going to be hard. And this open enrollment is something to soften that as we look for more money and work to solve the problem and keep what we have now. Keep it safe and keep it available for all of our students.
Mr. Wolf, go ahead.
Yeah, and Jen, I appreciate you saying might, because again, none of these decisions have been made, and I'm mindful that these are great people that watch the webinar and that are paying attention to all the decisions that we make around this. And I care about each and every one of those humans, and so I'm mindful of the impacts that will be. I do want to make a comment though, Jen, because what you are saying, so often these classes are passion areas. And I don't want to see passion areas leave our school. These are areas that our students not only come to our school, but are thriving in them and plan to pursue them in college and later in life, that were pieces of their family and their lineage and their family members that are operating in those employment spaces right now. And so while we're not sure where that 3.2 will actually land, I do know that some of the courses that you mentioned, Jen, are some of the pillars of our school and have been for some time, and I would hate to see those passion areas go away. So yeah, I definitely want to keep them flush.
Well, and your point is exactly correct too, is these aren't programs that can go away for a year and come back. It's taken us however many years to build them up, and having really dedicated staff to build them up. And so that's the other piece. There's a good question about avoiding hard conversations right now. This softens the hard conversations. We'll still have them, but it keeps our programming intact in the short term.
Mr. Wool, when you're building classes, what kind of number are you looking as you're thinking about those for, the word optimal, I know is that's a loaded term when it comes to staffing classes, but what numbers are you looking at? There was a great question about that.
Yeah, and I'll say, I'm not sure if any of them are on the webinar this evening, but Lisa Dean, Clay Lahareed, Giovanna, Monica, Autumn, some of our course scheduling team have been hard at work trying to crunch the numbers from course registration, and really proud of that team and some of the tough data that they've been processing. It is a little bit of a continuum of numbers that we look at. We have a hard cap that we are up against that is collectively bargained. And so, but ultimately, if we were to talk to any educators in the building, we don't want to push against that hard cap. I mean, we're talking about highly challenging courses, and we don't want to push to 32 and 33 per those classes. So we want to get those numbers down the best that we can. If they were in the 25 range, 26, even to 28, it's far more comfortable. The relationships that are forged are far more authentic. And yeah, when we push into the 32s and 33s, then that really makes the challenge on the educator and the students and the environment in the classroom. So I'd love to have it be a little bit further down. And I'd also say that we start to make decisions on value statements on classes that go lower than that. In a comprehensive high school, we want to have all of the different arts and sciences and everything that is available to our students. We want to have options for struggling learners to help them, graduate and to find options and flexibility in our schedule for those students. And so that number can range from 20 to 30. It just kind of depends on what we see as alternate suggestions to. I mean, it's a super complicated mix of the course scheduling process. And so we're also in the middle of it when we're right as we're making these recommendations to the board. So
let's do one more question. There are a few we didn't quite get to, maybe all of it, but we will put it in the FAQ and have that answered. And that is, if a student moves in through open enrollment, or a new student moves in because, they purchased a home, is there a difference, or is there a benefit or not? The easiest way to think about that is that, we start with a projection, and we want to hit that projection because that's how we're staffing the building. And once we're at that projection, if a new student moves in, whether or not they've moved in because of open enrollment or through buying a home, the benefit is still the same. You're still getting students who are moving in. Your economies of scale is really what we're talking about. You start enrolling new students in, and that money comes from the state. There's a lot of sunken dollars that have already been paying for lots of things. Now we're adding some currency to Mr. Wold's wallet, which is FTE, full-time equivalent. How can he add that extra 0.2 to add that section of whatever the science class is, that math class, the drama, whatever that might be? So any students moving in add value overall, because now we can start diverting things. We don't need a student to take a specific class that might have lower enrollment, because it may just increase a different class a little bit, but that revenue then can help us. So the first key is hit our projection. The second key is then anything over that is now benefits to our staffing model. Lindsay, I know we didn't have anything from athletics on there. Is there anything from an athletic perspective, though, that you want to add before we wrap up tonight? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I think you could open a whole can of worms with, offering open enrollment to potential transfer athletes. But really, I think this has a means of attracting more really great coaches. I get a lot of coaches that apply for positions that one of their first questions is, hey, if I coach here, can my kid come to school here? And right now I can't say yes, but I would love to say yes. And I think we have a lot of great people that want to come to this district and coach our kids and be a part of the community. And just one of those steps will be really great. And then also just kind of becoming on par with other districts surrounding us, and their ability to kind of pick a school that is the right fit for them would be really beneficial.
I want to thank all the community members who joined us tonight. The great questions that have come forward. We are going to add those to our FAQ tomorrow. Again, the website will go live. We'll have FAQs, more information. We'll have this presentation. Want to thank Ian, Lindsay, Jamie, Nick, and Jen for joining me tonight. Thank you to our community for all your support. You're sending us some of the most amazing students in the world. We're going to continue working hard as a school district. We want to continue to attract, retain, return students. And that's going to happen by having an exceptional school district. Open enrollment, again, isn't going to solve everything, but it is one piece that I think can help us to continue making the progress and moving our district forward. So on behalf of our district, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you on the next webinar around the corner. Go Islanders.